This is 16 to 1, a podcast about education, teaching, and learning. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
It's been a minute.
It has been a minute.
How you doing?
It's going to be another minute after this.
Yeah, we took a quick break for Thanksgiving. Our last session, we kind of skipped it. We got to the point where it was just holiday rush, and we were like, you know what? We don't need to do this to ourselves, and we definitely don't need to do this to you. Because trust me, dear listeners, you would have been paying for it.
We all need a break from education.
No, really, we needed a break for our Thanksgiving celebration.
Well, also, releasing on Thanksgiving is, like, not, you know what I mean? Like, it's probably not prime time for
No, we didn't figure
podcast
too many
listening.
podcast listeners would be eager and beating down the door to hear it. We're also going to be taking another break for Christmas, just because the way the podcast falls. And then our next episode after that, it's going to be
a new year.
It's going to be a new year and our 1-year anniversary of doing this podcast.
1-year anniversary of
also
when we got lofty and ended the world. It was great.
Ended the world.
I just mean we started the podcast and then look what happened.
Oh, yeah. I don't think.
Did you forget?
I don't think those things are really correlated in any meaningful way. I hope. Yeah. So anyway, almost our 1-year anniversary. It's been a fun year.
Yeah.
Of
The podcast
podcasting,
has been,
not the rest of the world. It's been a fun
It's
year.
hard to
podcasting.
separate, you know,
It
all
is.
of the things. It all feels like one big blob of 2020.
Yeah, time.
But it's been really fun. I've been to work on, and I've enjoyed having something to, you know, just get a little break from. I guess also as far as like the rest of my life, it's nice to have this.
Yeah. So thanks for sticking with us for a year.
A whole year.
Here's to many more. Many, many, many more years of podcasting, right?
I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what we did. Like I said, we'll be gone. So we're posting this week, the 10th. December 10th is when we're posting
the year
this.
of our Lord.
Yeah. So we'll be skipping Christmas week, and then we'll see you shortly after the new year.
In the new year.
Yeah.
I can hardly wait for it. But really, the podcast has been fun.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed the research. I've learned a lot.
Me
Not
too.
like I didn't think I was going to learn. I've just been, you know, I've enjoyed what I have learned.
Yeah. And that's really the main reason why we did it, so we can learn.
Yeah.
And
It gives us an intentional learning.
Yeah. And we hope you enjoy learning along with us.
If only I could call this professional development and use it for my ippy dippy, I'd be all set.
You're ippy dippy. You want to explain to
Oh,
our listeners
well,
what that
Ohio
is?
teachers know what an ippy dippy is, but it's our license renewal.
And
We
why
used
do you
to
call it an ippy dippy?
It's the individual. Yeah. All right. Hold on. What's this called again? Individual Professional Development Plan, aka
dippy.
your ippy dippy.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry, it doesn't qualify. If
I am
if
as well.
If there's some way that I can write up an official
you?
certificate for you,
I have to have it pre-approved, so I think I'm past that.
darn. Can you retroactively pre-approve
No,
it?
they don't like that.
Bet not.
It's very difficult.
Well, yeah. So
Anyways.
we've done a lot of learning. We've liked it a
have.
lot. This week, we're just going to pay a bit of homage to some of what teachers out there have been doing with this crazy pandemic-fueled world. We talked a little bit about some like kind of remote type resources for people, but this is just kind of like we hear a lot about general strategies and adaptations that people have had to make because of either socially distanced classrooms or online learning or, you know, hybrid plans or things like that. But we're just going to kind of look at a couple different examples and shine a light on them and kind of praise them. And maybe it'll be useful to some of our listeners somewhere, some of these strategies and examples. I think in a general way, and you could tell me if you think this is true, what I've seen is teachers becoming more well-rounded technologists. Out of necessity, you've had to learn like video and audio production tools, and
I've custom more PDFs in the past year than I ever have in my entire life. I feel confident in my PDF ability now. No, I agree. I mean, teachers, and I want to say one thing if you don't mind.
Sure.
Before is that we know all kinds of people who do all kinds of jobs who have had to reorganize what that work, looks like, and reimagine it and refigure it. Like, I mean, we know occupational therapists and physical therapists and social workers and people in the front line, like nurses, And so I've been so impressed by the way that all of, these people that we know can adapt and make work and take care of people. And so not to downplay the role of any of those important people who are literally on the front lines, but I feel like teachers have done their fair share of some legwork here to try to make it as accessible a year as possible.
Yeah. And I want to say that
as fair a year as possible, right?
I feel like you've done a lot with a little, which is kind of what
that's the story of education.
Comes from, right. Right. So it's like, I, on the whole, have not seen more support either through financial relief or, I mean, and I don't mean just like paying you more. I just mean like even money to help fund some kinds of these projects. I haven't seen more of that really. I haven't seen more time in your day to deal with these things. I haven't seen, so what teachers are doing more with less, and it's great that teachers are adaptable and flexible. It's a huge effort, and I think teachers are generally underappreciated, and I think that they deserve a lot of thanks as much as some of those other frontline workers that you've mentioned, because this year has been very difficult for everyone. So do you think it's fair to say that you feel like you've had to do more with less?
I crawl under the couch.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. No, I do. I mean, all of us do. I don't think there's anyone right now who would say that they feel like this is easy by any means.
Do you feel like you're more online? Meaning like kind of, do you feel like you have to be more available?
Yeah. I feel like I have to be available like constantly now. Like even when I get home at whatever time I leave, like I even still feel like I need to be available for the evening just because so many kids are in and out with quarantine and stuff like that I feel like, maybe this is the time that they have the family laptop or something like that. So I think we definitely all feel stretched even thinner just because of that. And because I feel more guilty this year, like leaving work at work, which is something I try to do the best that I can. So yeah, I definitely feel like I've been more connected to my phone than ever before, and it's a horrible feeling. But I also feel like I have to be, so there's like no in between, Like I don't know how to like have healthy lines like of those things because I feel like I can't.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it's just always creeping back in. So
we'll talk a little bit about this too, but the pandemic hasn't just meant more online type work. Just going along with that kind of being online all the time. It's not just internet based stuff because you have kids who can't, or for whatever, they don't have access to internet or they don't have access to a device. So you've, on top of dealing with a remote inspired approach, a lot of times you also have to deal with kids who are distanced from the building for whatever reason, quarantine or whatever, and who don't have access to a lot of online tools that can make remote learning easier. Yeah. So, and we'll talk about a couple of these examples that we'll talk about don't necessarily require an internet connection, but I mean, a lot of them do just because that's kind of where we are.
The nature of it.
Yeah, right now. But I mean, we'll talk about some of the problems with that because there are problems of access and problems of accessibility, meaning, accommodations and those kinds of things that come up with this sort of environment that we're living in now. So do you want to just kick it off? We're going to just kind of go down a list by subject here a little bit. Just some really cool examples of things that have been going on. You want to kick it off with the English language arts stuff?
One of the things on this list is that the Library of Congress, their digital collections are available, and they've really beefed up some of the access opportunities on there, it seems like, which has been kind of cool. I know a few teachers who have used those, so I would recommend that as a great source for some students, or resource. The one thing that I did going into this year, and this was just because of my anticipation as to what this year was going to look like, was that I bought one of the new iPad Pros, the big ones. And I bought the pencil with it, and it has been one of the best things I've done for my teaching career. Not only because it's another easy device for me to use. This is
not a hashtag Apple ad.
No, it's not. But I'd been telling Chelsea for a while that I wanted the new iPad, but I didn't really need it. was essentially where I was. And as we were talking about going remote, maybe, I mean, going into the year, we obviously had no idea what it was going to look like, but I knew I was going to have to find other ways to use technology. And so I thought, I liked my old iPad. I made it last a long time. I could make it worth my investment. And its ability to interface with Google Classroom and Google Docs and like the whole Google Education Suite has just been a dream come true for me. So
I've seen you, working on papers a lot, making comments, and
you can. Anytime you open something in Classroom, not another ad, but for Google Classroom, you can write on those essays, in my case, directly with my Apple Pencil, and it will save it as a separate PDF for the kids to see. So it has made so much. I mean, it's just made my life so much easier to use that.
That's more environmentally friendly because we're not
It is.
printing off copies and copies and copies of essays.
It's so easy to take places. Like it's small. I know this sounds like an ad, but honestly, like that kind of technology is basically endless if you're willing to, like, you know what I mean, put in the effort. I mean, it definitely took me a while to figure out what I could do with it. But because of the iPad, I've been able to make videos for students that are maybe quarantined or sick themselves that I've been able to upload on YouTube and make them available even on the school's Wi-Fi. So that process for me would not have been as easy had I not had that technology.
Yeah.
But that's also speaking from a place of privilege where I could afford it because it's not something my school could provide. So that's one of the, the biggest themes I think of this pandemic is that it's only made that margin wider.
Yeah,
as far
it does
as,
seem to be highlighting problems of inequality in schools, especially.
But for English, the iPad has been a dream, just because a lot of companies and a lot of websites have made even more books and things like that available without, worries of copyright issues and things like that. And so it's been really great to have that.
Some licensing stuff has been waived and some restrictions have been lifted. And
so in my case, it was an iPad Pro, but that was just because that's what I could most easily see myself doing in the classroom. And it has proven to be probably one of the best things I've done in my career.
Well, I'm glad you found something that works.
Yeah, me too. So for history and social studies, these are a few of the things that Chelsea and I have kind of combined our brains on. But the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum has been doing Zoom calls or Google Meets, whatever, with schools that they've been connected with. But they have on these calls Holocaust survivors. And so that's been one of the coolest things that I've seen come out of it. And it's something that I am looking forward to doing with my students when we return after Christmas break, is setting up something like that. But I've had the privilege of joining a few of those calls to hear survivors and liberators and things like that speak. But what a cool way to get voices into a classroom that keeps the survivor safe, that involves the museum in a really awesome practical way, but also brings the learning right to our faces in school. And so that's been one of the coolest things. And along with that, there are groups and performers and groups like theater groups who have been doing video conferencing as historical characters. So like one of the posts that I saw was about someone putting on whatever this play was, but they were Anne Frank. So they were zooming in, with groups of students, talking about the show, talking about the theater, talking about Anne Frank's life, like kind of doing
like a living
a big
history
combo.
kind of. Yeah, that's interesting.
So I think those are some really cool things. And I think that actually this type of learning is something that I think has been a good shift. And I think it will stay. And I think that
I was gonna say some of this stuff you would have hoped it was going on before, before everything had to be distanced.
For sure.
A couple of projects that I found, you and I even talked about maybe doing something like this with your classroom at one point, but there was like an oral history project thing where the what I was reading about is like students were assigned to go. In this case, it was just with their own families. It was like a sort of family history project. But I've also heard ones where kids are sent out into the community and either they kind of do socially distanced recordings or they just record themselves kind of speaking about the history of whatever project they're working on, so that they could do it on their phones.
I had a coworker do an oral history project last year before the shutdown. And so then as soon as I heard her talking about that and I was trying to think of ways that I could include technology but also in distance learning, I was like, what a brilliant idea. Because they could talk to the people in their homes, they could video call people. Those oral histories could be super valuable, and what a cool time to be documenting. And we're living it.
Yep. Another one that I have noticed popping up more is, obviously field trips are not possible for many people right now, at least in our country. Museums are shut down. You're not allowed to, take large groups anywhere. So,
or be in a large group.
Yeah, you're not allowed to congregate. So, virtual museum tours have become more critical for cultural institutions, art museums, history museums, all these kinds of things. But I actually have some friends/client, a company called Culture Connect, and they work with a lot of museums, and I've talked with their CEO, co-founder about this, but they do solutions for museums that allows people to essentially tour through the museum and interact with the art and exhibits in new and interesting ways, and ways that they couldn't even do in person.
That's so cool.
So virtual museum tours, a lot of those are available right now, especially with places that are closed because of the pandemic. So that's another opportunity for sort of history, social studies to approach history, but from a distance and safely. So moving on to sort of math science stuff, I found one that was really interesting to me just because it's kind of has to do with my background and my work right now. I was looking at this, and this is kind of for college and graduate school type applications, but I found an example of social distancing in sort of medical school, in a medical school setting. And this was Tokyo Women's Medical University. They're doing
That's amazing.
Virtual reality surgery streams. Students are observing surgeries happening in VR. There's like an overhead camera that provides some interesting observation angles for students to watch interesting surgeries being performed. And it's actually allowing students to kind of have a better view of these types of surgeries than they even did before, because before they just go into the operating.
This way.
Well, they'd go into the operating theater and just stare over the shoulder of the doctor performing the surgery. But now, with COVID restrictions in place, you can't have that many people in the operating room. But you can get this really interesting kind of collection of views from these cameras that are placed around, so that the event can be streamed. And then they can watch it in VR, which I think
they
is
can
pretty
probably
cool.
save it and view it later.
Yes,
as well.
absolutely.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. Like, again, this is technology that was available before the pandemic, and you would think that maybe some of that was, and I do think some of that was already happening using VR for education for these types of things. But it's just sort of interesting that this has provided an opportunity to open up more kind of innovative uses of VR.
That's really fascinating, actually.
Yeah. Yep. That was kind of the most interesting math and science realm example that I found.
I was going to say, probably most of the math and science stuff relies on pretty heavy technology use.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is one of the built-in issues, of course, which, I mean...
I was reading about adaptive tutoring in the math science world, which is kind of cool. So it's like, it's basically an AI-driven experience, but the whole concept is that if you get... one of these sort of digital tutors, like, so it's not a real tutor, it's like like an algorithm essentially, but you can, if you get those to be sophisticated enough, it can kind of, if you make a mistake while you're doing a math problem online or something like that, it can notice sort of how and when and why you made that mistake, so that it can be smarter.
So it has like logic.
There's logic built in to help students learn exactly the point where
cool.
They've gone wrong, instead of just getting to the end and not knowing where you screwed up. So there's some interesting innovations happening there.
I could have gone a long way if I had that access when I was young.
Yeah.
Because it was always the question of, well, how did you get that? Well, obviously I got it. I don't really,
Yeah, there's a problem because I don't know how I got the wrong answer.
But I got here.
Obviously, I got the wrong answer.
Right
but if I knew why I got the wrong answer, this would be a different conversation.
I would have an A on the top of this paper,
right,
please.
Right.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Well, for the arts, a couple of things that I've seen my school do. We're going to be having a remote music program featuring the choir and orchestra and the band. So that'll be something that those kids can still, they've prepared for it. They've worked hard to do it. And so, there have been a couple of opportunities for our music students, at least at my school, to have the chance to play for the community. Mm-hmm. Not very many, obviously, in pretty limited capacity.
Yeah, limited audiences.
But I've been happy that they've at least been given a few opportunities to, do their thing.
This kind of goes a little bit hand in hand with what I was talking about earlier about teachers becoming technologists, because, people who have a background in music education they're not necessarily going to be experts in using
Audio
and video editing
Right.
software. I mean, a lot of them, especially audio software, I suppose they've probably had occasion to use, but kind of not in this capacity where the entire experience depends on somebody's ability to stitch together a
Right.
performance.
For sure.
You know, in a lot of schools, it's hard because you're just using, you know, somebody's cell phone camera
Yeah.
or somebody's junky old, you know, whatever video recording solution.
One of our choir groups was recently featured in the Ohio State House event. And so what happened was somebody screen recorded the State House event off of Facebook Live, which is how it was being broadcast. But then when it was shared to other platforms for the school's use, that person kept having like notifications pop up on their
no.
phone. And like it's not their fault. Like they were trying to do a
Yeah.
favor to help all of us see it
Yeah.
because we couldn't stream it obviously. But and not that makes it any less of a, you know, outstanding performance, but those are some of the challenges that I think you know we've been all of teachers, all sorts of teachers have been trying to figure out. And so, like I said, like they've stitched together videos. The choir did that. The orchestra has done a little bit of that as well.
One of my family members was talking about another example of that recently. It was like a college around here. They did a production of Spring Awakening, which is a kind of edgy musical that I've actually had the opportunity to see, and it's pretty cool. But they designed that production, you know, they did it this fall. So they designed the entire production having to keep their actors socially distanced from one another, having to, you know, do all kinds of interesting scenes in new and different ways. But it essentially ended up in a whole new take on the artistic work. So, you know, it was designed with scenes in mind where, you know, two people are supposed to be in the same room or kissing or embracing or something. And what you do is you put side by side video of them acting as if they are, you know, touching their partner, but it's really, you've got a split, you know, two different cameras set up in two different rooms, and it's just kind of, but so it's like you got to put a different kind of thinking into that production. You got to put a different kind of planning into filming and stitching together things like that. But I think it's pretty cool. I kind of wish I could have seen it now.
Yeah,
but
me too.
Yeah.
So outside of kind of the core classes and then the arts, that leaves like the tech and career and business classes. And like at my school, that also includes our ag, like we have agriculture classes. And so a couple of the things, or a few of the things we've seen is like in my school, what's been really neat is to see the kids kind of step up and take ownership for some of these things. So one of our tech teachers, our computer teacher, he is in charge of creating the slides that go on the we have these huge TVs in common areas, so like in the hallways or in the lunchroom. And so these slides are made that you rotate all day long by the students in his classes. And it's been really cool to see these kids create these slides this year, because they're creating slides with pictures of sporting events and other events that our students can no longer go and support their classmates or teammates at. So I've seen more kids paying attention to those TVs, which is good. I mean, which is, you know, cool anyways. But it was something that we took for granted that now the kids are excited to see the, you know, volleyball pictures on there because we can't go to games anymore.
Yeah.
So that was kind of on the tech side. We've had, like I mentioned, we've tried to live stream some important events that have happened at school, as many as we can, because like athletic teams couldn't have banquets and things like that. So things that normally mom and dad or whoever, you know, is raising you would be able to attend and support. And so we've had to get kind of creative on how to make everyone feel included and valued while also trying to keep everybody safe. But a couple of the things I really liked was our FFA students. They did a drive-in movie night and they projected Grease on the side of one of our schools, which I thought was really cool. And then they did one of my favorite things the FFA does is the hog roast.
Future Farmers of America, by the way.
Yeah.
And what did they do?
They did a drive-through hog roast.
A drive-through hog roast.
You could still go up and get your hog. It was really cool.
We are absolutely from rural Ohio, in case you couldn't tell. But that's cool. That's
I mean,
cool.
it's been cool because
I know it's frequent. It's a community event.
It is, and it's a fundraiser. I mean, we're talking about groups that rely pretty heavily on the support of community, and so that has been a challenge for them because they still need the money because they're still doing things. But you know, that's kind of one of those lines they've had to walk to figure out, like, okay, how can we do things together and be a part? How can we support ourselves And so I've been impressed, like I've watched a lot of kids step up and do a lot of things that maybe they weren't so comfortable with, but it's just kind of what the year's called for. So it's been fun.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Physical education, a couple of examples. I found this sort of interesting one. It was a story of a gym teacher who was using kind of customized deck of cards. I'm not exactly sure if every kid had a deck or if they were kind of just doing this all together, but essentially this was an all remote district, and the kids would play various games with this deck of cards, and the cards have exercises on them of different sorts. And so essentially it gives an opportunity for the kids to have a social moment together where they collaborate, they play the card game or whatever, and then the thing you end up with is a handful of cards that's those are your exercises. That's your activity to do for the day, so it might be like get outside, walk around the block once or something, or like,
that's
do
cool,
20 jumping jacks or whatever it is. So that was kind of an interesting take. I think you might have read this article too, but there's a gym teacher who is allowing kids
it's so cute.
Yeah, he was allowing kids to opt in to house calls. So this guy was kind of going around his district, and again, this is probably much easier to do in smaller districts, but I have a little bit of struggle imagining your district doing this because it's pretty big. But this guy would allow kids to opt into house calls, and then he'd show up and do socially distanced exercises with his students at their houses. So that was kind of an interesting take. And I think in general there's been a shift, and from a lot of phys ed teachers, what I'm reading is that there's a shift from only physical well-being to sort of well-being to general wellness, because mental health is proving to be
more
a really
important,
challenging thing. Right, especially with kids being so isolated from one another a lot, and people who need opportunities for social development are struggling right now too. So there's been this kind of shift in phys ed to focus on mental as well as physical health. So, breathing exercises, meditation, stuff to relax, stuff
yoga,
to just kind of check in. Yeah, yoga,
stretching,
things like that.
Important things.
Right. Things that just sort of help address all of the different factors that are affecting kids right now.
I'm happy to see that happening, because I think that shift for mental health is really important, because our students, my kids for sure, have been, many of them, struggling with it, suffering, probably pretty silently on their own. And so, not that I'm happy it took a pandemic for there to be some focus on it, but I'm happy to see some of my kids feel validated and seen for, what happens inside their head that isn't their fault. So not a bad thing to come from it.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm kind of happy. Again, I'm hoping some of these changes will become permanent, because I think I'm not a kid who enjoyed the gym experience growing up. We talked about that. I think
I
we did
think there was a whole episode on that.
Yeah, so I mean, it was just not my thing. But if it had this more well-rounded approach, kind of about wellness, instead of just like running laps, but like instead of that, if it had been this thing where it's like talking about your general well-being, like exercise is important for your mental health. It's important so you can get better sleep. Just like all of these kinds of things. It's like a well-rounded approach to the habits that keep us healthy.
Yeah.
I would have been really kind of excited for that sort of approach.
Me too.
So, yeah.
And one of the other things, as far as special education and people who provide those types of services for some of those identified students.
Yeah. This has been a really hard one.
It has been.
Especially for all remote.
Yeah, because so many of our students rely on services that are in person and that require some real one-on-one, you know what I mean, as far as being serviced by the school. So one of the things that I found some teachers were doing, which I thought was cute, was, especially students who are identified or who are dealing with maybe emotionally disturbed, like those types of students, they rely very heavily on being able to read your face and see your emotions and things like that. And that's something that a mask has taken, away and out of the classroom. And so
and like, Zoom or digital conferencing is also difficult.
So some teachers have made like buttons, like buddy buttons when you were in school, of just their faces, and they're just smiling.
That's cute.
So it's like you can still see, their cheery face even when you are wearing a mask, which I think is cool, because I've had the moment for sure where a kid takes off their mask to take a drink, and I'm like, is that what you look like under there? Because I don't know a lot of them. And so for a lot of my kids are probably like, is that really what you look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really basic thing, but just not even being able to see facial expressions for a lot of the year, right? Because you guys are wearing masks all the
we
time
all
indoors.
wear masks all the time.
Yeah, missing out on facial expressions, you would think that wouldn't necessarily be a big thing, but it kind of is. And I don't even, it still bothers me because being in small towns where we live, it's like you walk down the street, you're smiling at people. It's a way of communicating non-verbally.
Yeah.
And I still find myself smiling under my mask, and I'm like, oh, wait.
People can tell. They can see it in your eyes.
Sort of, but it does kind of feel weird. Like, oh, they can't see me. Why am I doing, so it puts you in a weird state. So that kind of solution, especially for, those kinds of students, I think is a good one.
I want to take a minute and thank my mask for not letting anyone know if there's something in my teeth.
Yes.
That's been a real blessing.
That is a benefit of wearing a mask all the time.
I can sometimes, before I might drop something under my breath that I didn't mean to say out loud.
Mm-hmm.
And now they can't read my lips.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not a bad thing.
Not always a bad thing.
Probably saves my career. Especially this year.
Especially this year.
But one other thing I wanted to mention about special ed and services, associated with that is that schools have found creative ways to get therapy to students. There might be home visits if it's possible, meeting in a place where you can be worked with directly if it's out, like some places with more mild climates, I suppose, in Ohio right now. That's still a possibility, but they're still getting like telehealth calls and things like that. And that was one of the areas that I know there's a lot of scrutiny, I suppose is the word, when we first went remote at the end of last school year, was because we now had to find a way to offer physical support and all of these things that we just understood how they worked because it happened in person.
Right.
And so it's given schools some time to figure out, okay, like how do we get our kids to work with a speech therapist if that's what they need? So it's not perfect, but we do have a few of the kinks worked out.
Good.
But those are just a few of the, many, oh my gosh, there's so many things. If we were talking about everything teachers were doing right now, we would be talking until next year.
Mm-hmm. On that
but
front,
dang it, we're trying.
Yeah. I just want to very briefly talk about two other kind of related points to that, and that's interfacing with parents has become probably a whole different ball game this year.
Yeah.
And then interfacing even just with your colleagues and collaborating has also become a different
That's
experience.
been one of the worst. Interfacing with parents has only changed in that we don't have in-person parent-teacher conferences. I would say before I was already emailing and calling parents, so there hasn't been a huge shift.
Mm-hmm.
But it was weird to have parent-teacher conferences and never shake a hand or never meet someone in person.
Yeah.
But it was kind of nice to do them the way that we did because we weren't wearing our masks. So I really did see their faces and know what they look like. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of a blessing. But like I said, most teachers, even before this, were probably already doing pretty consistent emails and phone calls.
I was just imagining it would be even more frequent now than before.
Oh, I'm definitely in contact with more families than ever.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
What is it like to work with colleagues and collaborate and plan and do
I miss my colleagues.
You miss your colleagues?
I'm so lonely.
Aww.
My lunch group got split up.
Uh-huh. That's one of the opportunities you have in the day to just sort of be
few.
social with your coworkers.
So that was one of our big opportunities. And I feel very fortunate to work with the people that I do because I do have some great coworkers. And so I do miss those opportunities because lunch was a big one for us. But in an effort to try to eliminate how many teachers are in, a lunchroom and how many students are in the lunchroom at a time, we had to move to 3 lunches instead of 2. So that's okay. No one's fault. But I really miss my friends this year. Yeah. And I didn't realize how much I needed them. You know what I mean? In kind of a weird way. I didn't realize how much I was helping myself by going to lunch and laughing and talking to people. And then the first couple of weeks of school, I was super lonely because I wasn't going to lunch.
This is just sort of one more way in which the virus has been isolating.
Yeah. And so, not that I didn't want to go to lunch. It was just I was so busy at the beginning of this year trying to get into a routine. And so I finally was I have to go see people. I can't just sit here by myself at every free moment, or downtime that I have. So it has been hard because I feel like teachers are definitely better when we're together and that we need each other. And so it instead falls on my parents, who I called daily to, tell them what I would have normally said at lunch, or you have to, or these poor listeners right now. So it's been lonely. That's been probably one of the hardest things for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in addition to all of that, we've kind of seen schools try to somewhat reform themselves in terms of becoming more available, even with less face-to-face interaction. We see schools acting kind of like community centers because maybe, especially in rural communities, maybe the school is the only place where people can go to have Wi-Fi connectivity.
Yeah.
Or maybe the school is doing meal distribution because kids don't have an opportunity to, have breakfast or lunch.
Yeah.
Maybe mom and dad are working and that's like their chance to have. So we've seen, bus routes running in the summers and stuff like that. And meal services being provided when kids are remote.
We still have meals that are being put together for families even still. I think it was the U.S. Department of Agriculture has made it so that all children eat lunch and breakfast for free all year long.
Wow.
So that was great. Wow. But we are still, our cafeteria workers and other people who are donating time and effort are still putting together meals for families. We're right now in the middle of a big canned food drive at the school. We're in the middle of a toy drive for Christmas. I mean, these are all things we do most years anyways, but this
school
year
is still
it's
at the center of making the community go.
Yeah,
basically.
But this year it feels so much heavier.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to, we're all happy to do it.
Yeah. So that's just those are just a few of the ways that schools are innovating in the time of limited resources and limited face-to-face instructional hours.
I'm getting a little choked up. I'm like kind of emotional right now.
Yeah,
about all of it.
It's all a lot, and it weighs heavily on people making the decisions, and it weighs very heavily on teachers, I know for sure. So
you act like you're around one sometimes.
I am. Around somebody upon whom all of this weighs.
Upon whom
heavily.
Is it me?
It's you.
No, but really, I mean, I would say that, oh man, what have we not learned in 2020? That's where I am right now. But oh geez, I don't even know what to say. I'm thankful for what I've learned. It's told me a lot about myself. It's shown me a lot about my job and my kids and my coworkers. But I'm tired.
Yeah, we're ready for 2021.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah. Okay. Want to move on to fill in the blank?
1 year down.
1 year of fill in the blanks down.
1 year of fill in the blanks down.
COVID teaching done. 1 year of.
Jeez, I don't think it's close to over, but COVID teaching, yes. The podcast may she reign forever.
Yeah, long may she reign. Fill in the blank. Yes. From many moons ago. The last time we asked this question, it was about this phenomenon that we spotted during the Florida recount in the presidential election in the year 2000, when there were these punch card ballots and voters would attempt to make their choice, and they only succeed in detaching a little bit of the perforated paper that is supposed to be how they vote instead of the whole thing. And it caused this little bit of paper to hang down. And the question was, what is that little bit of paper called?
It's called a hanging chad.
A hanging chad. I don't know why it's called that. It's a weird name, but I just remember everybody back in the year 2000 cracking constant jokes about hanging chads.
Hanging chads.
So yeah, that was that.
Okay.
What's this week's question?
This week's question.
This one's fun.
I'm going with a theme of the holidays.
Uh-huh.
Okay. This holiday tradition's origin is unknown, but to this day, many people search their tree in hopes of finding this thought to be lucky veggie. Many believe it will bring a year of good fortune for the person who found it, while others use it as a way to figure out who gets to open the first Christmas gift. So what is that famous food item?
Wow. This one's weird. I can't wait.
You just learned about this one.
I did.
This should have been this should have been your next session.
Yes.
This could have been it.
Could have been it. Could have been it.
All right. What'd you learn?
Oh, what did I learn? I learned about goop that comes out of your hot water heater when you drain it. This was kind of fun. In case you didn't know this, listeners, you're supposed to somewhat regularly drain your hot water heater, the tank, to get rid of basically sediment that falls to the bottom of it that prevents it from heating as efficiently as it should. So I decided I was going to drain our hot water heater. But when I did so, when I turned it off and allowed it to cool down for a while and then attached the hose, I had trouble getting any water to come out of the hose for a bit. And I was like, what is happening? Is the valve not open or what? But no, it was that there was something stuck in the hose that was coming out of the bottom of the hot water heater. So, I had to unhook everything and stick my finger in the bottom of the valve, the release valve of this thing. And there's this weird, slimy, kind of see-through. It sort of looks like really wet, chunky Vaseline.
This is so gross.
Basically, it's like maybe lightly blue tinted, but it's mostly like clear gel stuff that was coming out of the bottom of the hot water heater, and I'm like, what is this? So it's like slimy, it kind of looks like maybe the silica packets if they absorbed a lot of water. So it's just like clear, slimy stuff. And I'm like, this is not right. I called my dad because he and I had drained our hot water heater at our house growing up. And I'm like, I don't remember this. You did not prepare me for this phenomenon. What is this? He was like, I'm not really sure. So I Googled it, and apparently, and I did kind of know a little bit about this, but hot water heaters have essentially sacrificial rods of metal in them. Because all metal corrodes over time when it's in water. So manufacturers of hot water heaters will put these rods they function as anodes into hot water heaters, and they're usually made of, it's like a steel core wire, and it has magnesium, aluminum, or zinc kind of wrapped around it, and they're intended to essentially fall apart over time, and then they fall down in weird chunky material to the bottom of your hot water heater, and then you replace the rod, and it'll keep the inside of your tank from wearing out as quickly as it otherwise would. So that is the kind of disgusting way that I learned about anodes and hot water heaters. What did you learn?
That's a lot. You always learn the most interesting, intelligent things, and today I'm going to talk about a Chia Pet. Okay?
Okay.
Well, I haven't had a Chia Pet since I was very young. I actually only remember one, and I don't remember it actually ever really working all that well.
Okay.
But definitely had one.
Yeah, I think I had
the
one as a
thing,
kid too.
Get you one, whatever.
Uh-huh.
And I can never really understand why, one, it was so hard to grow it, and two, why we didn't do it all the time. And then you got me a really adorable one from The Mandalorian of Grogu, which is the child Baby Yoda and his little egg.
Right.
And it took me like a half an hour to do the whole thing, like from start to finish. It was like a process.
Yeah, it's kind of involved. It's not
I totally
straightforward.
thought it was going to be like stick the seeds, water it, be gone. And there was like, it was not that quick.
You gotta like weirdly, like they have to absorb water.
Yeah.
It makes a paste. You have to spread the paste over the
and it's like, it's only going to last like 2 weeks once it does grow. And you need to do it all over again. I thought it was like longer.
It's like
more
maintenance
hearty.
involved in Chia Pets, people. It's a commitment.
So anyways, this week I learned why my mom never really re-upped on the whole Chia Pet experiment.
Yeah, but you have a really cute...
It's very fun.
Baby
but
Yoda Chia Pet.
I could not understand why we didn't have more Chia Pets.
Now you know.
And now I totally get it.
Moms everywhere are like, I could have told you that all the
I
time.
know. My mom's probably going to like be like, well, I tried. I'm like, you did, but also you didn't tell me it was this much work. So for children, they're not really best suited.
No, it's
really not a toy at all.
I very much remember Chia Pet commercials from on kids TV growing up, because I remember hearing the jingle, right?
Characters or that dog,
right?
So
they are marketed toward kids, but they are not really a very kid friendly or even a certain kind of adult friendly item.
Was that at me?
No, I just it's
well, I am not the gardener.
Not straightforward.
So yes, but also I was like, oh, I'm just gonna do this real quick, and then it was like 7 steps.
It was a process.
Anyways, I'll post a picture of it when it finally does something. But right now it just looks like worms.
We'll stick it on our website.
It's been like 4 days.
It does look like worms, little worms. Little white.
I guess if you're listening to this with any intent of shopping for Christmas afterwards, don't do Chia Pets.
Chia Pets are
unless you want to keep someone busy for like 3 weeks for very little return. If
you want to get somebody a chore that does not have much payoff,
if you'd like to add some more work to your life,
get them a Chia Pet.
We will see you in 2021.
Yeah, we'll see you in 2021. Happy holidays. Have a good New Year.
Wear your mask.
Wear a mask, and goodbye to 2020.
See ya.
Bye. Hey listeners, thanks for supporting 16 to 1.
We're trying to grow our audience, so please check us out at 16to1.com, all spelled out, and tell your friends about the show.
On our website, you can find links to follow us on social media, an archive of all our old episodes, and a contact form where you can get in touch.
Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next show.
Please remove the knuckle.